Thanks for joining today's session, which is called the Development Opportunities with the SAP Cloud Platform ABAP Environment. So my name is Florian Wahl. I'm part of the SAP development organization based in the headquarters in Germany. And my personal role there is the one of a product manager for the ABAP environment itself. And as you might know, the ABAP environment is quite a new topic, but we are out on the market with that product actually since 1 year now. And what I want to do today is, of course, to give you an overview of what you can do actually as a developer with the ABAP environment, but also give you some condensed summary of what we've learned from customer and partner interactions during the last year. And regarding the agenda, I will first start off with a quick product overview, so covering both architectural aspects, but also the benefits and the value proposition we foresee, and followed by some scenarios and use cases, and that will then be the specific part about what use cases our existing customers and partners are actually implementing with the environment, and we have condensed that down to some crisp overview here. And I will then follow with a live demo so that you can actually see how an end-to-end scenario, an exemplary one, is implemented, which consists of an extension to an S/4HANA cloud system with a Fiori application on top. And last but not least, I will conclude with a short outlook. So in terms of the roadmap we currently see with the releases following the following months, but also the next year and further. So let us start with a quick overview about the value proposition of the ABAP environment. So first of all, we have a category called the Cloud ERP. So that means that the ABAP environment shall serve as platform to support customers and partners in their transition to the cloud, which means both on the side of the core applications. So for example, transition from an on-premise environment into an S/4HANA cloud system or any LOB solution, and actually use the ABAP environment as platform to create complex extensions to these applications. But also on the side of really the custom code, so the set code lying in the on-premise landscapes at our customers and partners, to give an opportunity to actually transform these assets to the cloud and run and develop and run that code on the ABAP environment, but I'll come to that later on, how that looks like in particular. So we have a second scenario, which you can see listed here in the red box. That's actually a special offering for partners we are planning for mainly next year, which in the end shall make the ABAP environment a platform for partners to really develop and run full applications and make them available to their customer base at scale. I will also roll out some information about how the technical model actually will look like. So we are rolling this out as part of TechEd this year, also the first time, that you can get an impression how these scalable models will actually be implemented. So next we have the ABAP environment as a so-called innovation platform. So I will come to that later on as well, but the ABAP environment is an environment that is completely managed by SAP, which actually allows us to push the newest innovations into that environment, so the customers and partners don't really have to care about upgrades, updates, patches, hot fixes, etc. All of this will be done by us, and that ensures, on the other hand side, that customers and partners can always work on the latest version of the platform in the cloud. And that also plays an integral part as part of the overall ABAP release strategy, because the ABAP environment will be the environment where all the innovations of the ABAP platform will be released first. So providing access to that platform allows also customers and partners to always work on the newest ABAP innovations SAP has developed in the end. And last but not least, there's one advantage more from the architectural point of view. So this clean core concept, which means in the end that customers and partners using the ABAP environment are able to decouple custom code from the core system, so an ERP or an S4 system, for example. And by decoupling the code between these two environments, because the ABAP environment is actually a separate platform in the cloud, enables really also a decoupling of the life cycle. So upgrades and updates on the core application side shall be much easier if you do these decoupling tasks. And I will also come to that later on in the presentation, how that actually looks like and what to consider as part of these concepts. So which implications does that have on the architecture? Looking on the very left-hand side, you see the toolset perspective. So if you are an ABAP developer or you are experienced in that space, you will recognize that there are quite many innovations also in the space of how the environment is administrated. So it's part of the SAP Cloud Platform, which means it is accessible via the Cloud Cockpit. You can easily start up a system, you can access actually the launchpad of the actual backend of this ABAP environment system. And from the developer perspective, we have fully invested into the ABAP development tools in Eclipse, which also means on the other hand side, we don't have SAP GUI anymore for development tasks like the famous SE80, for example. We fully invested really into the ABAP development tools to make the tools actually capable of dealing with this cloud environment. And the new programming model, for example, we have implemented on the environment. And last but not least, that's also an aspect which is actually one of the prerequisites for really working as a developer in the cloud, is that we have connected the ABAP environment to Git, so that customers and partners are actually able to use a Git repository to transport code between different ABAP environment systems. So for example, like a 3-tier landscape in the cloud, but also from on-premise systems to the cloud, if you specifically want to do this code transformation task of bringing code from on-premise to the cloud environment. So in the central part, you see the ABAP environment as part of SAP Cloud Platform release. We have there a new programming model, which is called the ABAP RESTful programming model. We have plenty of information available here at TechEd as well. So for example, in the app space in the next hall here, next to this one, you can actually try that out. And it's basically a programming model which is much optimized for handling web services. And that also is reflected in the structure of the programming model. So it's now both much easier and also much flexible to actually develop web services, for example, for UI, which can be a Fiori UI, or also for integration tasks like integrating services exposed by the ABAP environment with other systems and landscapes. And last but not least, on the right-hand side, we started off with the ABAP environment supporting extensions to S/4HANA Cloud only. And over the last year, we have then released also support for the well-known Cloud Connector here. That means that you can connect your landscape actually via a secure tunnel to SAP Cloud Platform and call any exposed services or function modules in your on-premise landscape and actually use the data in the ABAP environment to extend data and processes. So going forward to the use cases. To start off with the first paradigm, the so-called Cloud ERP, we see from discussions and projects with first customers and partners that it's quite essential that we now have an ABAP-based extension platform for the SAP-provided cloud applications like S/4HANA, for example, but also the LOB solutions, because in the past there was a lack of possibilities to really create complex applications to these complex extensions to these applications on a separate platform. We had, for example, the Java environment with the respective Cloud SDK. But now comes the ABAP environment, and we now have also for the ABAP developer a real development environment where these applications can be extended. You might know that these applications within the actual application stack provide some basic functionality for extensions. So for example, these in-app extensibility framework, but to create really separate logic and more complex extensions here would be done on the ABAP environment in that context. Coming to the second scenario, we have the situation that many customers and partners have releases such the SAP ERP or an S/4HANA system, and customers and partners want to ensure that actually the extension applications are always based on the latest innovations made available here in the cloud. And that is a perfect opportunity without really a relationship or requirement on the core application side to really switch to the ABAP environment as development environment and start creating extensions as of today on the new standard, like the new programming model, like using SAP Fiori as a user interface, and you name it. And especially if you regard scenarios where you want to actually use services out of SAP Cloud Platform, the ABAP environment is now completely embedded into SAP Cloud Platform, and you can actually call these services out of SAP Cloud Platform like Leonardo services, machine translation, you name it, directly out of the ABAP coding. So that's also one of the big new innovations. And as said, independent of the actual backend release you have at hand in your on-premise landscape, you can start off today actually on the ABAP environment to create extensions on the latest releases we have shipped there. Going further, I would say this scenario of integration here is actually also from the technical architectural side one of the most interesting and important ones, because you can actually use the ABAP environment to create extensions on a single entry point and connect them to several backends. Again, in most cases independent of the release you have. And that means on the one hand side that you can use the ABAP environment as a so-called integration hub, which is in the end really an integration of different systems, but also as data integration, which means that if you have data coming from different backends, you want to, for example, analyze at one place, the ABAP environment can serve as really the integration platform to first of all bring these data together and then aggregate them and make them available for the end user at one single entry point via your application, for example. So that's this scenario, and what I forgot to mention, that's also one of the key scenarios there when it comes to externalization. The ABAP environment provides external access by nature because it's actually on a cloud platform standing in the internet. And if you want to expose specific backend functionality to the end user without giving them really direct access to your backend in your own landscape, you can actually use the ABAP environment to create a kind of abstraction layer, make only specific services and functionality out of the backend available to this end user, and actually create an extension application where the end user can safely interact with your backends. So that's the third one here. And counting also for the other scenarios I've just mentioned, we again have this decoupling aspect here. So you are decoupling the life cycle of your extension application on SAP Cloud Platform from the release cycles of your backend core applications. So again, the advantage of decoupling here. So now comes this partner model we foresee from the technical side. So as said, that's actually the first time that we make that public because it's still in planning phase, so we're discussing this. But in the end, we want to provide a platform where partners can develop and run software as a service applications on the ABAP environment and make it available to several customers at once using multi-tenancy. And the current approach here, still in planning phase of course, is to use the client field for that multi-tenancy enablement. And in the end, using that account setup here, the partner will have two accounts, one development account, one production account. In the production account, there will be running one instance of the application, which is shared across different customers using the multi-tenancy enablement. And I think that's a great one in terms of really scalability and managing a partner application at one space, managing the life cycle of the application at one space, but serving a mass of customers at once. And furthermore, so if what we are planning as well is if a partner doesn't really want to use one application instance which is shared across different customers, but for example has bigger customers who require dedicated system underneath, who require dedicated, really separate data space in the database, for example. We foresee also the model that these partner accounts here are actually divided into different logical entities, so these so-called spaces, where different ABAP environment systems are running. And that would be then the full separation for bigger customers, that every customer has an own system and an own application running on that. And managed, so how that will be managed is via these AAK, AAS, which means add-on assembly kit as a service. So from the development instance, the partner will push the project to the AAK, so the add-on assembly kit. And from there, the software release can actually be imported into the different ABAP environment systems running here in the cloud. And the customer will have in this scenario just a kind of empty SAP Cloud Platform account, if you will, where he or she can do all the setup like users, connection to different backends, and will then have a subscription, which will in the end be just a tile on Cloud Platform to the actual partner application. So coming to actually one of the last scenarios we see is, and that counts for all customers and partners equally, is how to transform actually custom code you have in your existing on-premise landscape to the ABAP environment. And given the concepts we have in place in the cloud, you have several things to consider. So first of all, the decoupling aspect. So being on a separate platform with your development tasks, you're actually decoupled from the backend. You don't have direct access to, for example, tables or you name it. And in this case, you have to establish APIs, which can be, for example, OData APIs coming from the backend, but it can also be remote-enabled function modules, where you can actually call backend functionality remotely. And this requires, of course, effort to implement that approach compared to a set application, for example, that directly accesses backend functionality. Furthermore, we have the new programming model based on Core Data Services and SAP HANA. And especially if custom code is not written based on HANA and doesn't use a Fiori UI, I think it's obvious that it involves also effort to actually transform the applications using these concepts. And last but not least, we have in the Cloud in New Language scope, we have a so-called list of released objects, because you have to take in mind that the whole environment is managed by SAP, and that involves, on the other hand side, that we can't allow any use of the SAP objects we deliver here. So a famous example would be, for example, access to file system, which cannot be allowed in the cloud because this would harm actually the operations of the environment we are managing from the SAP side. And the good news here on that part is, although it will be effort in any case, we provide toolset for that. So as of now, we have two possibilities. So we have an ABAP test cockpit check variant, which checks existing code against the list of released objects we have in the cloud. And with the 1908 release in August, we released a Fiori-based application, which actually allows a remote check from an ABAP environment system to your on-premise landscape to analyze your existing set code, and does all the analysis on a nice Fiori UI with charts, with drill down functionality, and also the functionality to apply quick fixes. And this will also be further enhanced, so there's a high priority on these tools and to make this process more convenient. So finishing with the theoretical part, I will accelerate a bit given the time is running out. I will show you a quick live demo how an application, so a Fiori-based application extending an S/4HANA cloud system could look like. And that's actually implemented end-to-end. So in this case, I'm a sales manager from a scenario point of view, and I want to make an application available to my sales employees where I calculate the bonus for them based on sales orders they've generated in the S/4HANA Cloud backend. And for that, we need access to the business partner data in S/4HANA Cloud, because the business partner is actually the one who creates sales orders. And we need some kind of API from S/4HANA Cloud to actually provide the sum of sales orders based on the input of a specific employee. We give the API. And the scenario is quite nice because it's actually also a mixture of these in-app extensibility concepts. So we have created a custom API for the sales order fetching, but also a side-by-side application running on the ABAP environment, which actually gives the user access to these sales and bonus calculations. And we will now start off quickly going to the S/4HANA Cloud system. Just one second. So I've opened that up here in the browser, and we have these I think well-known application to access actually an overview of sales orders. Remember that guy here, because I will use him later on in the actual application. We have this guy, Richard Castle, who has created several sales orders with a low amount of a few hundred US dollars. And in the end, the application running on the ABAP environment shall return the sum of these sales orders for the guy, Richard Castle. We then have, as I told before, set up a custom CDS view in the S4 backend, which actually provides an aggregation of sales orders based on an employee input. And I will not go into too much detail here, but you see that, for example, clicking together different data sources using these custom CDS view for your application in the backend. We have defined a CDS view which returns sales orders. It returns the item, the creation date, the currency, and the sum. And this one will be used to actually call this API from within the ABAP environment to return the data. And we will do this now. So what you have to do here is first of all use a concept in the ABAP environment called the so-called service consumption model to actually import the structure of the S/4HANA Cloud API. So what you can see here is actually created on the ABAP environment. And in this case, as soon as you import such an API via the service consumption model, you get a so-called abstract entity. So that's automatically generated by the tools. And that provides actually all the structures, all the fields the APIs provide. And in this case, you see an example for the business partner API. So you have first name, last name, address, etc. So basically all data that exists for a business partner. And we use this API together with the sales order API to actually make the call to the S4 system based on an input which business partner shall be considered and which sales orders should be returned to the application. Next to some logic I will not show you now. So of course we have implemented some class which actually does the API call. I will not show that here, but I will rather show the data model we have defined here, because as the ABAP environment is based on core data services, we now need a data model which actually aggregates all the data and makes it available to a Fiori application, which we can then access. And you see here, for example, is this bonus calculation view, which has associations to different data sources like the release status of the bonus calculation, like currency information lying actually locally in the ABAP environment, and we expose this data model to a service so that it's accessible from a UI. And one important thing here is as well that we use the annotations here to actually manipulate the UI. So we can very specifically tell which fields are in which position in the Fiori UI, where we have value help, which fields are mandatory, etc. And this is exactly done here using the annotations within the CDS data model. Having said that, we now need a service because the UI has to consume a service to actually show the data. And that's a very easy one. We just say we define a service and all these different entities out of the data model should be exposed. And we use the so-called service binding to actually bind that service definition to a protocol, which is OData of type UI in this example. And now comes a very nice feature of the new tools we have at hand here. We let the Fiori Elements framework generate a Fiori application based on the data model and the respective annotations we have given. And we just log on to this application. You see that a Fiori application is built up here. We can go here, we create just a bonus calculation here. And now I select again this guy, Richard Castle. And now the first call to the S4 backend is executed. So the backend actually returns the business partner data about Richard. And we say Richard has a target of $2,000 here as an example. The actual revenue shall come from the backend. We give him a target of 20%. We give some random ID and we say that every sales order from beginning of this year until today shall be considered. We say that the bonus plan is not released yet and we have done a short consistency check. In this case, we save this bonus calculation now to the local HANA database, which is part of the ABAP environment, and we see that this entry here is generated. And as soon as I click here, the calculate bonus button now, this call to this custom API in the S4 backend is executed. And if everything works, it returns the sum of all sales orders for Richard Castle. And we click that, it usually takes just a few seconds, and you see the sum comes back. So Richard has an entitlement for a bonus of $570, which equals 20% of every dollar above 2,000. So that is a very quick scenario. To conclude the presentation, I would just give a quick overview of the roadmap. You can actually find the roadmap as part of the public SAP roadmap slide as well, so it's publicly accessible. But just a few words about some key topics. So we have started off with the ABAP environment, especially this year, to actually enhance the programming model and the language scope. So there are topics like dynamic programming we have released, and also support of RFC to connect to on-premise backends, for example. We then have in this release things like the Fiori application to do custom code analysis. And going further, and I would stress one topic especially because we've actually released that already much earlier, is here the trial offering, which has been asked many times. And we actually released that on Tuesday this week, so during TechEd. So you can now go to the official public trial of SAP Cloud Platform, log on, and you will find an ABAP trial there where you can actually do some testing of the ABAP RESTful programming model. You can develop a simple Fiori application, etc. We have also some documentation available here at hand. And next year will be much more to really make the environment mature in the context of supporting partners with the multi-tenancy enablement for partners, but also things like compatibility for BOPF objects, or things like database replication between core applications and the ABAP environment to make the whole data migration process much easier. So as said, the trial is accessible via the public homepage. I would not stress that again. And I will conclude with that. So if I don't know how many sessions are actually happening today still of these topics here, but we have plenty of topics here available at TechEd. We have recordings about the topics, so the programming model, the code transformation, etc. And if you have questions, I will be there for some minutes. And you can also find me in the developer garage in the next hall. Feel free to ask questions, and I'm happy to help. Thank you very much.